Hi, everyone that's joined now. We'll just be waiting about 2 more minutes, 3 more minutes, just for any more people that want to join a bit late, and then we'll kick off. All right, I think it's a good time to kick off now. Hope everyone's having a good day. So we've got a couple left, more people coming in, but I'll kick it off so long. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Blade Brink, and I'm joined by Marine Kusa from Oceana. And today we'll be discussing the important topic of how fishing regulations around traceability and sustainability are changing across the globe. However, before we dive into the presentation, I would like to first introduce myself a bit more, as well as Open Food Chain, and then I'll hand over to Marine to give you an introduction of herself as well as Oceana. To give you a quick overview of the content of the presentation, it has been split into two parts. The first section will be covered by Marine, and we include seafood traceability landscape in Europe, as well as the specific regulations within the EU. While I'll present two regulations outside the EU, and to top it off at the end, we'll explore the new techniques coming, the new technologies coming into the market to help meet these regulations and touch on some financial and consumer trends. So, as I said before, my name is Blade, and as you can probably hear, I'm not European. I am from South Africa, and I am the product owner of what we call Fish Chain. Fish Chain is basically the fish traceability side of our business. So Open Food Chain is a blockchain food traceability company. What does that mean? Well, we act as the overarching technology that connects the different actors in the supply chain together. Our technology connects to the already existing ERP systems through the use of APIs and allows for the publication of data to our blockchain for two quick reasons. One, so the consumer can see the full supply chain, and two, so that all actors in the chain can see all the other actors in the chain handling the product. As you will hear in this presentation, due to the upcoming regulations, these two reasons will soon be quite compelling. I would just like to ask quickly, if you have any questions, please do put them in the chat. My colleague Olex will be keeping a close eye on them. And any questions that we are not able to answer now, he'll get back to you over email. I'll now hand it over to Marine.
Yes. Yeah, hello. And thank you so much all for being here. Thank you, Blade, for inviting me. My name is Marine, and I conveniently work as a marine scientist and a policy advisor with Oceana. Here in the slide, you have my X handle if you feel like Xing during this presentation. And Oceana is one of the largest ocean conservation NGO in the world, so you may have heard of us. There's about 200 staff worldwide, and we have offices almost on every continent. And so what I'll be doing today is that I'm going to be talking about the seafood traceability regulations in Europe, because I am based in Europe and I am sadly only familiar with the regulations in Europe. But if you are not based in Europe, I think it can still be relevant for you to see what is going on here. And perhaps that can also come as an inspiration for people who are coming from other regions of the world. So, but before I dive into the regulation, I wanted to define certain terms here: transparency and traceability. So both of these terms are often used interchangeably, but they don't mean the same thing. Transparency is the availability of reliable information on a product. And traceability is the transfer of that information from one level of the supply chain to the next, and ideally all the way up to the consumer. The reason why I put a few critical questions here, they're more kind of food for thought questions that are really relevant for traceability, if this is what you're thinking about. First, what type of information are we talking about? Traceability is a very loose term, and you could be talking about traceability information that is relevant for consumer health, for example. That's not the same kind of information as what might be relevant for conservation or for management purposes. So these are the kind of things that need to be thought of and defined. Then what kind of product are we talking about? Seafood, again, is a super generic term. There are hundreds of species that are called seafood, including algae and obviously fish, shellfish. And these products come into a variety of forms, right? They can be fresh, they can be processed, they can be canned. So again, what type of product are we talking about here? And then the reason why I put that last question, how is labeling linked to traceability, is because sometimes I've heard people say these two things are not really linked, which is wrong. They're completely linked. You cannot have good labels on a product if you do not have adequate traceability beforehand. So the three regulations I'm going to be talking about, next, Blade. The three regulations I will be talking about that pertain to traceability in Europe are the Common Market Organization, the Fisheries Control Regulation, and the EU-IUU regulation. You might be familiar with some of those, you might not, but I will just define briefly in this presentation what they pertain to. In the EU, we currently have a pretty good traceability system. It's actually pretty robust, but it's not perfect, and there are still some issues. Some of the main issues are the fact that, like most of the traceability systems around the world for seafood, it is still largely paper-based, which is crazy if you think about it, given the digital age in which we live, and also given that we're talking about wet products, on which I've seen, if you've been at landing sites, you see the papers, the ink is all smeared. I mean, and this is real. Like, that's what we work with in Europe, and as I said, in much of the world as well. In Europe, each member state is responsible for implementing the regulation, and individual business owners are responsible for acquiring themselves the adequate traceability method. So that leads to quite a lot of inconsistency. And one of the other issues is that not all seafood products are covered by the regulations that I will be talking about. So next, wait. The first regulation I want to talk about is the Common Market Organization. And interestingly, it doesn't necessarily, it's not a traceability regulation per se. So it's actually, it's a set of rules that regulate agricultural and seafood markets in the EU. And as part of the CMO, you have information on the mandatory information that needs to be on consumer labels. So as I was saying earlier, why is this important? It's important because if you have poor traceability, you cannot possibly provide that kind of information on the label. So what is the kind of information necessary for seafood in Europe? We must have on the label the commercial designation and the scientific name of the species, the production method, is it fished, is it from aquaculture, the catch area, and the country of production, and the fishing gear. And this, unfortunately, this information is only necessary at the moment for fresh and frozen products, not for processed products or for prepared products. And then there's other types of information like defrosted, best before, allergens, and etc. But you can see that the point here is to show that you can see that there's a detailed amount of information that needs to be provided in the EU that is mandatory for fresh products. And you must have a robust traceability system in order to be able to provide that information at the tail end of your traceability system here, which in this case is the label. Now, the next regulation I wanted to talk about is the EU Fisheries Control Regulation. That one was just revised recently. It took years for it to be revised, but finally we reached an agreement in June. And there's a lot of things that have changed, but there are two specific things that pertain to traceability that I wanted to mention here. That's the control regulation now will be calling for the creation of a digital traceability system for all seafood products in the EU. So this is really big because, as I mentioned, at the moment, it's still largely paper-based. If we manage to go to a completely digital traceability system for seafood products in the EU, that's a massive shift. And then the next thing is that it also, we may hopefully see that processed products need to have the same kind of traceability information as fresh products. At the moment, the traceability information for processed products is very minimal. The reason why I'm saying we may see this, might, etc., is because it's not going to happen right away. It's pending a study of feasibility from the European Commission and a delegated act. So hopefully we will see these changes in 5 years from now. And finally, the last regulation I wanted to talk about, which is quite important as well in the realm of traceability, is the EU IUU regulation. As part of the EU IUU regulation, there's the requirement for exporters to the EU to provide catch certificates along with the products they're exporting into the EU. And on this catch certificate, they have to provide a certain amount of information regarding the product that they're exporting to the EU. Now, with the revised IUU regulation, that information is going to be a lot more detailed, meaning, again, that the traceability system is improving, is becoming more robust. But yes, it hasn't happened yet, but it will come into force soon. And again, there will be an electronic database for this catch certificate made mandatory. So I think that the European Union has understood the cry for trying to make the traceability system electronic and digital and shift from a paper-based system, which is what we still largely work on. I did want to briefly, oh, I'm sorry, Blade, next. Sorry, I haven't said next, but you've done a really good job. I did want to briefly talk about the next regulations that we should keep an eye on. So if you are in the EU and if traceability is something that you are, that you do want to follow, the Commission is thinking of creating a sustainability label or a sustainability ranking system for seafood products in the EU. We're not sure if this is something that they're going to propose as part of a new law called the Framework for Sustainable Food Systems that they may propose this fall, or if this is something they would propose as part of the seafood marketing standards, a revision of the seafood marketing standards. Either way, it's good to keep an eye on these two things because we may indeed see the creation of a sustainability label for seafood. The reason why I'm talking about that is that you cannot have a sustainability label if you don't have adequate traceability, because again, in order to measure the sustainability of a product, you need detailed information on that product, which implies you need good traceability beforehand. And then it is possible that we will also see a revision of the Common Market Organization. It's not sure, but if there is a revision of the Common Market Organization, we may see that in the future, in the near future, there will need to be more information provided for seafood products in the EU. So again, the more detailed the information, the more robust your traceability system needs to be. So I hope this was an interesting overview of some of the regulations in the EU and how they pertain to traceability. I just wanted to talk about these 3 pieces of legislation to kind of define this traceability landscape in the EU and how robust it has to be. So yeah, thank you very much. And I will pass back to Blade. If you have any questions, you can post them in the chat, or I'd be happy to answer them afterwards. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Maureen. I do see a question that's just come through, so just keep monitoring that chat, and then we'll go on from there. So as I said before, I'll be taking over the second part of this presentation, and the first regulation we'll be looking at outside the EU is the requirement for additional traceability records for certain foods from the USA. This regulation was recently finalized by the US FDA and was published on May 1st, 2023. So the FDA has taken a crucial step forward here in food safety regulations with the finalization of this rule. The primary goal is to enhance traceability, improve food safety, and identify the sources of foodborne illnesses more effectively, and address safety risks associated with certain foods. Now, this rule applies to companies which sell these certain foods listed on the FDA's food traceability lists. Now, these foods include shell eggs, nut butter, certain fresh fruits and vegetables, ready-to-eat deli salads, cheeses, and most importantly for us, of course, seafood products. To achieve the goal of enhanced traceability, the rule imposes detailed record-keeping requirements on affected businesses. So the record should cover critical tracking events, CTEs, such as the date of harvest, the receipt, the shipping, catch location, the weight, and many more. And it also needs to contain key data elements, KDEs, that must be recorded, such as lot numbers, establishment names, previous sources, and the original raw product source. Now, these records must be legible and maintained either in a paper-based or an electronic form. A traceability lot code must also be assigned to the food at the time of initial packaging or the transformation, and this code will help identify and trace specific batches or lots throughout the supply chain. Now, this rule becomes effective 60 days after its publication, which was May 1st, 2023. But because the food traceability's final rule requires entities to share information with other entities in the supply chain, the most effective and efficient way to implement the rule is to have all persons subject to the requirement come into compliance by the same date. So this compliance date for all persons subject to the record-keeping requirement is January 20th, 2026. In summary, this rule marks a significant step forward in enhancing the food safety and traceability by focusing on the record-keeping and critical tracking events and key data elements, and by implementing the traceability lot codes. This rule is allowing for quick identification and resolution of potential food safety issues, and ultimately it will contribute to the reduced risk, better foodborne illness source tracing, and improved overall food safety in the United States. The next one we'll be looking at is the Fighting Against Forced Labor and Child Labor in Supply Chains Act. Now, this regulation is a significant piece of Canadian legislation enacted on May 11th, 2023. The Act still needs to be approved by the Governor General of Canada and it's received its royal assent before it can become law. However, we'll explore it anyway. So this Act aims to hold companies in Canada accountable for their supply chain labor practices and combat forced and child labor. Let's dive into the key aspects of the Act. So the Act serves its vital purpose of promoting ethical and responsible corporate behavior, and it focuses on disclosure efforts against forced and child labor in supply chains with the ultimate aim of eradicating these practices. The legislation applies to businesses operating in Canada with a global revenue of $250 million or more, and companies falling under this category are required to comply with the Act's reporting obligations. Under the Act, companies are obliged to submit an annual report detailing their efforts to combat forced and child labour in their supply chains. This report provides transparency and accountability for their actions. The annual report should encompass comprehensive information. This includes the company's policies and procedures aimed at preventing labour abuses, along with the documentation of any identified incidents of forced or child labour within their supply chains. Now, to ensure transparency and accessibility, the report must be made publicly available. Companies are required to publish the report on their official websites and in any other form that may reach the public. This can include through QR codes on their product, and this would make the information accessible to all stakeholders as well. This Act introduces importation prohibitions on goods produced using forced or child labour. So this measure ensures that products manufactured under the exploitative labour practices are also not allowed into the Canadian market. This regulation is part of a larger Canadian initiative against supply chain forced and child labour. The government's commitment to addressing these issues leads us to believe that this won't be the final point at which the supply chain is honed in on so closely. In conclusion, the regulation represents a significant step forward in ensuring responsible corporate behaviour. And this legislation links quite closely to us at Open Food Chain, as within Fish Chain, we are currently working in an EU-backed project called the Titan Project, which brings together over 23 participants from 14 countries. Within this project, we are aiming to trace the shrimp production line in Vietnam with the goal of providing a clear supply chain free of forced labour. To end off, by mandating annual reporting, promoting transparency, and prohibiting the importation of goods produced under exploitative labour conditions, Canada has demonstrated its commitment to eradicating forced and child labour from global supply chains. So how can technology help here? Well, technology is playing a pivotal role in guiding us towards transparency, efficiency, and accountability in the seafood industry. As we explore the innovations reshaping this industry, we discover a collection of technological marvels that are revolutionizing traceability on a global scale. So I'm going to ask you all to picture this. There's a fishing vessel out at sea, and there are IoT devices, real-time data. There are IoT devices collecting real-time data on temperature, humidity, and location. These unassuming devices are providing a crucial thread in the evolution of traceability. They are seamlessly relaying their findings to our blockchain system, weaving a narrative of the seafood's journey. But the story doesn't end there. As consumers, we hold the power of knowledge in our hands, actually quite literally. Mobile apps and QR codes allow us to scan, discover, and connect with the seafood we choose. We simply scan and we can unlock a world of information about its origin, catch method, and certifications. Now, armed with this knowledge, we can make informed choices, driving demand for sustainable food practices. Now let's dive into the realm of artificial intelligence and machine learning. Beneath the surface of the data streams, these technologies are working tirelessly, identifying patterns and anomalies within the supply chain. They could be used to guard against fraud, mislabeling, and illegal practices. And through their proactive efforts, AI and machine learning could ensure that our seafood choices align with our values. These AI instances are also starting to be used to detect inefficiencies within the supply chain to allow for an ease of waste identification. But what about authenticity? So this is where DNA devices comes in, a technique that verifies the species of seafood with unparalleled precision. By comparing the DNA sequence of a sample with a comprehensive database, we can confidently ascertain the seafood's true identity. This technology minimizes the risk of seafood fraud and ensures that what we consume aligns with our expectation. Currently, another side of our business, Open Food Chain, is working with these DNA devices from a company called INL. We are actively trying the devices with our technology in order to identify the DNA sequence of olive oil in the same Titan project that I mentioned earlier. Moving on to another technology, geotagging and satellite tracking brings real-time monitoring to the forefront. So by geotagging catches and integrating this data into traceability systems, regulators are gaining the power to oversee fishing activities, prevent illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, and enforce sustainable practices. Now, let's integrate this technology to create this fabric of progress. Blockchain is the cornerstone of the traceability and creates this unbreakable chain of trust that we're talking about. IoT devices gather that crucial data, while the QR codes connects the consumer to the source. The AI and machine learning safeguard the integrity, while the DNA barcoding I mentioned earlier ensures the authenticity. So what is the solution? Well, open food chains blockchain technology is the key here. We see all these technologies joining forces in a common direction. However, what we're seeing is that each ERP system is adopting their own technology, meaning the producer sees as far as the end of his chain and not all the way to the retailer. So through API connections to our blockchain, Open Food Chain aims to link everyone acting as this overarching flow of information. In conclusion, these technologies redefine the seafood traceability. Together, they empower us to make sustainable choices and hold the industry accountable while protecting our marine ecosystem. Moving on, the financial impact of traceability systems in the seafood supply chain is a subject of increasing interest and importance. There was a study conducted by Global Scan, which shed light on the financial benefits that can be reaped from the implementation of these systems. According to a financial think tank, such systems have the potential to more than double the earnings before interest and tax margins of a typical seafood processor. And this improvement in profitability can be attributed to several key factors. First and foremost, traceability systems reduce the risk when doing product recalls by enabling the swift and accurate tracking of products throughout the entire supply chain. This translates into fewer costly recalls, preserving both the revenue and the reputation. Additionally, the enhanced visibility and control offered by the connected systems helps reduce the product waste and minimizes the inefficiency, further contributing to that improved financial performance. Furthermore, by ensuring the compliance with regulatory requirements, traceability systems help companies avoid the legal costs and liabilities. Now, as a result of these substantial financial benefits, traceability systems are increasingly capturing the attention of investors. They're not only seen as a tool of enhancing profitability, but also as a means of mitigating the financial risk associated with supply chain disruptions and legal issues. Now, let's shift our focus to the consumer trends related to the seafood consumption. A global survey involving 20,000 participants across 23 countries revealed that 58% of people have already made changes in how they choose to purchase seafood in an effort to protect fish populations. Even more compelling is the fact that 83% of respondents expressed their willingness to take further action in the future to safeguard our oceans. These findings underscore a growing consumer consensus of the environmental impact of seafood consumption and a strong commitment to sustainable choices. Further studies have demonstrated that a significant fraction of the European consumers are willing to pay notably higher prices for sustainably produced fish from Europe. Now, seafood eco-labels plays a role in influencing the consumer's behavior, as they can increase the consumer's willingness to pay between 16 to 24% more for eco-label products. This data showcases the consumer's preference for seafood that is not only sustainable, but also traceable, reinforcing the importance of a traceability system in meeting those consumer demands. So, in conclusion, the financial benefits of these traceability systems in seafood supply chains are substantial, and they're encompassing improved profitability, reducing the risk, and enhancing the operational efficiency. To conclude this presentation, fishing regulations and traceability practices are undergoing this profound transformation worldwide, as we've seen from what Marina has been showing us in her presentation, as well as some of the legislation that I've shown you. Robust traceability systems play a crucial role in addressing the challenges of illegal fishing, seafood fraud, and labor violations. By implementing innovative technologies like blockchain, IoT, AI, DNA barcoding, and satellite tracking, we can achieve greater transparency, accountability, and sustainability in seafood supply chains. Most importantly, we are able to meet the regulations by keeping detailed records of our actions on the Open Food Chain blockchain. So with that, I'd like to thank you for listening to this presentation. I hope it's been informative from both my side as well as Marine. And we just have one other speaker, Patricia, who's actually my colleague, who I'm sure would like to just show you her accelerator program. I did see it in the chat come through. I'm not sure if any of you guys checked it, but I know she'll be showing a little bit of what it is now. Patricia, I'll hand it over to you.
Yes. Thank you, Blade. I hope everybody can hear me well, because I'm traveling, so I'm stuck in a cool cafe in Amsterdam. Is my sound okay? Can somebody do a thumbs up, maybe from our team? Okay, good, Blade. Thank you. Yeah, so next to Open Food Chain, what Blade explained, we run an accelerator since 2019. It's for agri companies only, and we do one cohort a year for around 8 companies. And I would just want shortly to explain what we do, because it could be interesting for you, especially, for example, if you want to explore traceability in your chain. So what we do is we have 3 phases in our program. Phase 2 and 3 are quite similar to other accelerator programs, but our phase 1 is unique, because what we do there is make sure that you, for the solution that you have in mind, get stakeholder alignment. So to give an example from last year, ePort Solutions based in Kenya joined us, and they have a farm management system. They wanted to create an add-on to their current farm management system, but to do so, they want to create an add-on to make farmers bankable. And the hard thing to do that is because it's an industry solution. So you need to know what data banks will accept. You need to know what data farmers can give. You also need to know some tech expertise. So to get that solution off the ground, you need input from all kinds of different companies. So what we did is we created a group with MasterCard, different banks from Kenya, farmers, tech companies, the company itself, and you always have a moderator in that phase. And that moderator will work with the whole group, 3 days, 3 hours each day. And at the end, you will have a validated solution that has been verified to the whole industry. And you will also have an 8-month roadmap. So that's quite unique. And it's not a group of people that we already know, and we just say, hey, join this topic, it would be interesting. Now, every year we look at the topic, we look at the company, and myself will handpick those experts from our network or from LinkedIn, but it will only be persons for your specific topic. So that's quite different. But normally other programs, they, for example, do a marketing class or a workshop, and then maybe something about data room, etc., etc. But our first phase is only for your company. So if this sounds interesting to you because you have a complex problem, a complex challenge that you want to solve, we have a solution in mind, please get in touch with me. I would love to explore if our program could be a good match for you. And if so, you can be selected for our program that will start on the 7th of November. So that's me. If you have any questions, I will drop my email in the chat. Back to you, Blake.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, everyone. This concludes the end of the presentation. I would just like to firstly thank Marine for joining us. I'm sure everyone found it very informative. And thank you, Patricia, for sharing the accelerator program with us. And I have put in the chat there, and we have been monitoring it. The PowerPoint will be shared with all the participants after the presentation. We'll take a list and we'll share it with you over email. Perfect. Thanks again, everyone, and see you at the next Open Food Chain event. Bye now.
Thank you. Thanks, Blade, for organizing. Bye-bye.